next speaker, I'm going to shift gears a little bit and introduce Mr. Mark Fulmer. He is a geopolitical strategist and researcher, formerly worked on the local, state, and federal government in the field of bioterrorism, emergency preparedness, which I'm very interested in. I run a little neighborhood watch on steroids in Williamson County myself, called Wilco, We the People. And he's also been involved with CDF as a faith leader and now works for the Liberty and Freedom group? Liberty and Justice group at his local church. So I'd like to welcome Mr. Mark Fulmer, and I'm going to switch gears on the computer here, so give us a minute.
All right, thank you. I appreciate so much, Marcia, the opportunity to come and speak to you guys. And it's so awesome to hear the pastors here. And, you know, really the bottom line is this. It's not political. It's spiritual. Really. When basically the issues concern chopping off the body parts of children to gender transition, those are moral, spiritual issues. And when we look at things like, these books going into the public libraries, that is something that really is dictated from our moral, spiritual point of view. So it's really a spiritual thing. What I want to talk to you tonight, I'll introduce our topic here shortly, but I'm going to do a little bit of a book giveaway here. And I want to ask trivia question. You, first person to answer the trivia question. This is my book, The Wuhan Incident, Bioweapons and the Emerging Global Reset. I worked in level 4, level 3 biolabs. I ran some of the largest pandemic planning exercises in North Texas. And I worked with Category A agents and all of that. So a little bit about my background. But I write extensively about a 5-letter agency in this book that Doge is putting on the chopping block that actually contributed millions of dollars to the gain-of-function research in China. Is there anyone here that can name that 5-letter agency? Yes? USAID. Okay, all right. I heard somebody in the back say that first. Yes? All right, sir. All right. Even though we've pardoned Fauci, with Biden pardoning Fauci, and that U.S. aid has been one of the single most contributors to using your tax dollars for gain-of-function research with communist China, and so much more. All right, trivia question number 2. This is my book, my latest, do geopolitical research. This is about the proxy war in Ukraine. And one thing I have to say about Ukraine, it's like Dan Bongino says, it's an ATM cash machine for the liberal international order, for the global cabal. And I write extensively about this in this book, my research here. So trivia question number 2 is this. Trump's first term in office, he made a phone call to a particular individual, and right after that, there were calls for impeachment. I'm lifting this book on Ukraine. Who did Trump talk to that set those things in motion, calling for his impeachment? Marshall? No? No? Who said Zelensky? Oh, okay, yeah. He did talk to Putin, he talked to Zelensky. Did you say Zelensky? All right, there you go. He made a phone call to Zelensky. And that set up this cycle for Trump basically the impeachment process and for them taking down so many really good people, that whole Russia collusion, and you mentioned about Putin and Russia, the whole Russian collusion thing that came about, it was in the epicenter of what was happening in Ukraine. All right, last book here, and I'm going to be selective. I won't give a trivia question on this. I want to give to our pastors back there. This is a Christian book that I've done. It's the latter rains. It's called Cycles of Restoration for Renewal of for the Remnant. And what this book is about is what Colby was talking about, how this nation, we really need revival. You know, if you just focus on, and I love the way that you pastors put it, if you focus on just this conservatism without Christ, it really becomes almost kind of a humanistic, neutral thing. And you can't, it won't work. It's failed. It's doomed for failure. So in this book here, I write about the remnant. We have the Remnant Alliance. I'm doing a part 2 of this book that will be available later in the spring on the remnant. I'm talking about Remnant Alliance, but you know the biblical concept of remnant. And I want to gift our pastors back there with this book there. You'll have to figure out how you're going to share that. Okay? All right. Praise God. Well, tonight I'm going to talk about what I refer to as getting back to the principles of our constitutional republic. Something that's very much on my heart, and I want to talk to you about some of the projects that we are doing in Fort Worth, Texas, in Tarrant County. It's no surprise that, you know, that there is need for reform in the GOP. There's a need for vast reform. Not only that, I would say also revival as well. Because if you look at all that's happening with rhinos and establishment Republicans that are compromising our great constitutional republic by siding with Democrats, socialists and communists, and the deep state, the global cabal, there's an urgent need for reform. In our own Lone Star State, it's no secret, we've had this thing going on for decades with liberal Republicans, rhinos that have sold out to the Democrat Party through the House speakership. That is something that has been there, it's been going on for years. And then in Washington, we all are very well aware, we have seen for decades the deep state control through the rhinos. So, what I want to talk to you tonight is really getting back to what is already the structure our pastors have laid for us, and also Colby has laid. And that is really principles. Getting back to the principles, the Judeo-Christian biblical principles, is what's going to be needed desperately. And I'm going to make a personal disclaimer here. While I am a registered Republican, I have no allegiance, hear me out, I have no allegiance to any party. My only allegiance is to Christ and Him alone. He's my master, He's my Lord. I can pull out my voter registration card, and it's got the little R by it, but let me tell you this. I'm about biblical values, biblical principles. And there are Republicans out there, guys, that are far from that. And they need to either get saved, delivered, set free. They need some serious course correction. So that's my personal disclaimer to you tonight. I promote principles, not just conservatism or conservative principles, but those which are biblical. And I get an opportunity to speak. I know there are a lot of believers in this audience, but I get opportunities that speak at GOP events. And I always share my testimony in Christ. I was lost on my way to hell, and Jesus saved me. Jesus set me free. And let me tell you, if you haven't received Jesus as your personal Lord and Savior, you don't have a relationship with Him. We've got pastors here, we've got individuals here that you can talk to in this room after tonight's meeting. So it's my conviction that our founding fathers framed the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the very blueprint for our republic through a Judeo-Christian worldview. So this is what I want to drive home. And I want to talk a little bit about this. And somewhat, I knew in the beginning here I'll be preaching to the choir, but I want to give you some helpful, what can we do, approach as when I wrap this message up. First of all, I want to stress this. We've got to continue to educate conservatives. We are a republic, not a democracy. Article 4, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution states, it says, the United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government. So there it is. Benjamin Franklin, we know the famous words when he walked out of that meeting there for the drafting of the Constitution. And it was asked, well, it said, what do we have? What form of government? Franklin said, we have a republic if you can keep it. Also, Thomas Jefferson said this, the republic is the only form of government which is not eternally open or at secret war with the rights of mankind. Now, I also like this, what John Adams said. He said, democracy will soon degenerate into an anarchy, such an anarchy that every man will do what is right in his own eyes, and no man's property, life, or liberty will be secure. He says, remember, democracy never lasts long. It soon wastes, it exhausts, then it commits suicide. Compare and contrast. We look at what was happening in our nation with the American Revolution. Here, with our founders, we had a republic. The emphasis was law and order. Now, on the other side of the sea, the French Revolution was, on the other hand, a democracy of mob rule. It lacked the principle. It lacked the higher principle guidance that we find in the Scriptures. Here, the American Revolution was orderly in principle. The French Revolution, there was anarchy and chaos. Also, here, in the United States, in our nation, our founders, there was a peaceful process of appeal. You know, the founders were constantly making appeal to the King of England. And when it came down to it, that the last straw had been broken, it was then that they had said, look, we can no longer abide under the tyranny of the King of England. So they went through actually a peaceful process. On the other hand, in France, what was happening with the French Revolution? There was bloody rebellion. Executions by the guillotine. It was chaotic. The outcome here with the American Revolution in our nation? Freedom and liberty. And a constitutional republic. The outcome of the French Revolution? Tyranny, oppression, later evolving into socialism and communism. I'm going to talk to you about this concept. I write it extensively in my book on the proxy war in Ukraine. And it's this term that I explain in detail, but it's very apt for understanding the compare and contrast between the democracy and a republic. The term democratization is the gradual process of surrendering our republic to democracy. The United States, what we see in this nation, you know, we're actually just a few steps away from what has happened in Europe. If you look at the process developing in their governments in Europe from the French Revolution all the way down to current social political history. Here in the United States, we have seen a progressive agenda and compromise within the Republican Party with rhinos and moderns. In Europe, on the other hand, we look from autocracy, nations move towards socialism and others toward communism within a mere century after the French Revolution. So look at the direction. And this is what we have to see, the handwriting on the wall. We don't want to go there where they have gone in Europe. In Texas, there's been an infrastructure that I talked about of moderate Republicans having given control of the House over to Democrats. How did that happen? That's something that had been planned for years in the making. Read the 45 objectives or goals of communism. They talk about the planning that has gone into place. You know, we talk about, maybe we're as conservatives, we have a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan. They had a 75 and 100-year plan, a century plan for influencing, for compromising every single institution in our nation. Public education, entertainment, arts, media. It was a process of gradual infiltration that had occurred. So, consider the United Kingdom, where extreme censorship includes being jailed for going against the leftist narrative. Matter of fact, you have almost, the censorship in Europe is on steroids. I mean, it was bad enough what we have seen here with legacy media, with mainstream media, you know, over there, they'll put you in jail for if you have something that they feel you're speaking that's politically incorrect. In Washington, the deep state left progressive agenda silences conservatives through the moderate GOP. Happens all the time. Look at the Chuck Schumer game and all the years that they have done in silencing conservatives. The European Union also encourages countries to relinquish nationalism, have open borders, and to conform to a one-world globalist society. You see, that's the path that they have gone. Why? Because they have chosen democracy, the mob rule, giving in to whatever the people demand. And what happens, it was never the vision. The founders knew that that would lead to disaster. So when they founded this constitutional republic and the principles which we have, so especially this past year, we have witnessed a battle in our constitutional republic, a call to compromise through the errors of what I call democratization. A book to add to your reading list is that of Robert Malone. I was on the stage with Robert Malone in Dallas about 1.5 years, almost 2 years ago. We were doing a medical freedom conference. Of course, you know Robert Malone, he is amazing. He's absolutely brilliant. He was a guy that really came up with the protein derivative complex that is used in vaccines, COVID vaccines, and also later weaponized, that I talk about in my book in the Wuhan lab with the gain-of-function research. I was on the stage with Dr. Malone, and he mentioned this. He said, I am so dismayed at what I'm seeing emerge as this fifth generation warfare, where we're seeing an industrial censorship complex. So I'm devoting the remainder of my time to address this. And of course, at the time, he was referring to a research project. It's called, this book is amazing. It's called Wars: Enforcing the New World Order. And he talks in detail about, matter of fact, this thing about the democratization. It's not only a strategy of the deep state, but also the global cabal's agenda for a new world order. And in it, he says this is Dr. Malone. He says, for the deep state and the global elites, democracy, listen to this, has come to mean the political stability and the uniparty in Washington, combined with global alliances with NATO, EU, United Nations, and World Health Organization. Aren't we so thankful that Trump, one of the earliest executive orders was to get us out of the World Health Organization? Isn't that amazing? Yeah, that's where it was, because World Health and the United Nations had this globalist agenda for everything from vaccine passports to enforcing mandates. The whole thing there, it basically, that they have conceived. Why? Because they can use those things to implement control of the people, where they relinquish their rights, their freedoms, their liberties. So thank goodness, thank the Lord that Trump, he went right away saying, look, he said, as far as the UN and the World Health and these organizations, no, we are not going there. So, but these institutions, and this is what Robert Malone says, the concept of preserving democracy, listen to this, the concept of preserving democracy was weaponized against conservatives. Oh, interesting. Let's do a little video clip here. I hope it will play. Let's talk about democracy. How many times did you hear the word democracy being used by Joe, being used by Kamala, being used by everybody on the liberal, progressive, socialist side? There's a reason for that, because they're embracing the concepts, the principles of what is really an antithesis to the principles of our founding fathers in this constitutional republic. So I'm going to play this. This is what I call let's see if you'll play it.
My vision for America's future all merited a second term, but nothing can come in the way of saving our democracy.
No. The Constitution, the Statue of Liberty, symbols of American democracy, alive in our communities today, under attack. We have a choice between someone who wants unchecked power and has an outdated vision of America that is no place for us, or a president who will respect all Americans and will never view us as others. Protect our democracy and our communities. Vote.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
If Republicans continue to hijack the rules of the chamber to prevent action on something as critical as protecting our democracy, then the Senate will debate and consider changes to the rules on or before January 17th, Martin Luther King Jr. Day.
That he has sub-zero interest in becoming.
The problem in our country right now? Authoritarian leaders who are so hell-bent on gaining power and keeping it by whatever means necessary.
The tour across the South is part of his campaign for democracy. Launched last week, Newsom aimed...
When our democracy was in danger, he stood up. Adam Schiff took on a corrupt president. He fought to protect our values and the rule of law. Now we face an even greater danger. We need Adam Schiff more than ever.
I'm Adam Schiff, and I approve this message.
Right. Okay. So there we go. That montage, I use the words basically how they love to use the word democracy, because they're embracing principles that are antithetical to our constitutional republic. And you see, it's almost like they lay shame and a guilt trip. Oh, you conservatives, you're a threat to our democracy. Well, you know, I would say, yeah, I want to be a threat to your democracy because we don't want democracy. I'm going to talk a little bit about the golden mean for the republic, or biblical principles. Benjamin Rush said this: "We profess to be Republicans, and yet we neglect the only means of establishing and perpetuating our Republican forms of government. That is, listen, the universal education of our youth in the principles of Christianity by means of the Bible." Wow, it's amazing. How have you been through biblical citizenship courses? Green paid. Okay, all right, a few of you have. I'll talk a little bit about that and some of the projects that we're doing, but they really drive home the American history, the history of our founders, which was thoroughly biblical based. And it's amazing. It's a great course. You take that by all means. I love reading old books, especially those books that are really good books that have gone out of print. There's a book that an individual brought to my attention. It had gone out of print for a number of years. I think somebody else picked it up. An individual by the name of Harry Atwood wrote a book called Our Republic, the Golden Mean, the Standard Form of Government. He was a solid, Bible-believing Christian. He was an attorney at law in the 1920s. And actually prior to that, in Chicago. And when Woodrow Wilson, you gotta know, I have a fascination for what was going on in history, because that period of history in 19th century was really a critical paradigm shift for what began laying the foundation for all that we see now with this trend toward democracy. Woodrow Wilson, very progressive force, driving force, came up with this concept, the League of Nations, which is a forerunner of the United Nations, and a very, very progressive individual. And yet, when he came out with his platforms, Mr. Atwood, Harry Atwood, was dismayed that he saw a lot of Republicans were siding with what he was talking about. And they were coming. Matter of fact, there was a shift that started taking place. Republicans began abandoning their conservative principles that they adhered to with the Republic and began accommodating, began compromising. So our GOP, as I mentioned, needs revival and reformation. There can be no more compromise. We need to get back to the principles of this great republic. How do we do this? Harry Atwood, in this book, he wrote what he called the golden mean principle. So this book was published about 100 years ago. I talked already a little bit about Atwood, and I'm trying to get a number of his books, because it's almost, if you use Google search engines, they've literally scrubbed the search databases with this man's name. He wrote books, amazing. He wrote other books on keeping God in American history. I was able just to get a copy of that the other day. But this is a guy writing in the 1920s. He has a burden. He is so burdened for his nation that he gives up his law practice to commit his life to teaching about the principles of the Constitution and about our history and about our founding fathers. Wow. So in this book, I just want to share a few principles of his concept. He says this: The golden mean of the republic is a concept almost as old as humanity itself. The mean is the middle point of the degree in inequality or state which avoids dangers and errors of extremes. We should return at once with all humility and penitence of the prodigal son to a strict and literal adherence of the republic, the golden mean between autocracy and democracy to have a republic. And I'll explain a little bit about his concepts here that he gives about this. There's a comparison chart, and he goes from one extreme on the left side that you see in the slide are the extremes of autocracy. From autocracy, we see this progression going down. In the middle is the golden mean that Harry Atwood emphasized in his writing, the golden mean of the republic. On the other side, we see the extreme of democracy. But if you go down, there's actually a progression. Look at autocracy. You have the system of government under tyrants. Whereas the republic, you have statesmen. Under the democracy, you have a system of authoritarian demagogues. Back to the other extreme of autocracy, you see bondage. And you just go down the list under autocracy. Bondage, oppression, arbitrariness, submission, coercion, reaction by force, and feudalism. On democracy on the other side, from demagogues, you see those that are given to license, immoral conduct, given to impulse, given to agitation, discontent, anarchy, chaos, and the outcome is socialism and communism. Where, as Harry Atwood said, in the middle, the concepts of the principles of the republic result in statesman, liberty, reason, contentment, justice, progress, property rights, and free capitalism. So that's an example of some of the key concepts. Now, I want to wind down my talk tonight back to what our pastors have exhorted us on, the projects that they're working on. There with the public library, amazing. Then what Colby has shared with Remnant Alliance and the faith component that has been so essential to CDF, amazing. The key, really, the education reform, it's going to be the church. It's going to be about us taking a stand and mobilizing what I call the ecclesia. Why do I use that term, ecclesia? People say church. Ecclesia is actually a term from the realm of government, from civil government. But it's interesting that Jesus uses it. Remember where he's having that dialogue with Peter, and he says, "On this rock I will build my ecclesia." The ecclesia is not just about a religious, spiritual institution confined within its own four walls. But the ecclesia, when it becomes mobilized, is where we take the gospel, we take biblical principles into the marketplace, into spheres of influence and education, arts, entertainment, as well, yes, as government. The church and Christian leaders, we must lead the charge by preaching and teaching the biblical principles to get our nation back on course. That's what the pastors were saying. It's amazing. It's sad to think that the biggest pushback that they would have to bring reform in their own community would be from the pastors. They say, "No, you're getting too political on me. I'm not going to go there." We need to get away from this namby-pamby Christianity to where the men of God, as in the days of old, stood up and proclaimed the Word of God in full confidence and authority. The ecclesia must become engaged with not only the mountains of government, but all other spheres of influence in our culture and society. I want to talk a little bit as I'm wrapping up tonight. I'll take some time for questions. One of the vehicles that I've been involved with here lately in doing this is for Liberty and Justice. It's an organization that's founded by Nate Schlatzline. He's a District 93 representative and a pastor. Yeah, no Nate. Nate's incredible. Nate's actually my pastor, and then he ran for office. How crazy is that? You have pastors. You can have pastors running for office? Yeah, absolutely. If God calls you as a pastor to run for office, do it by all means. And that was Nate, and he had this vision for because at the time, back in the social justice movement that was going on during COVID, how can we run against the grain of that through biblical justice and biblical principles? And there's a threefold principle for liberty and justice. And Colby, we'll have to talk sometime offline about maybe partnering for liberty and justice with the Remnant Alliance and all that's going there, because I know that they're looking really to partner with like-minded organizations. So here's the threefold mission. First of all, is to mobilize the church, the ecclesia. You do it by partnering with local churches that make an impact on their community and to support godly candidates. We bring candidates and vet them through biblical principles. We ask them a series. We have almost 40 questions that we drill them with, where they stand on particular issues. If they don't line up, sorry, we don't. Now, for Liberty and Justice doesn't endorse the candidates. What they do is they have voter guides called Friends and Family that they circulate. The second area of their mission is to wake up cities. We partner with local grassroots organizations for spreading the Word of God, for spreading the gospel, because that's what's central in all that we do. The third thing is we take a stand. This is what we talked about tonight, and the things that we need to do. Going to our city council meetings, going to our county commissioner courts, going to the school board meetings, going to those forums. That's where we, as the ecclesia, we take a stand. We say no more. We're drawing the line here. And we become active reformers, protecting our God-given freedoms and liberties. We have recently partnered with Rick Green and Patriot Academy. And Linda and I have been biblical citizenship coaches in Patriot Academy a little 4.5, almost going on 5 years now. And one of the things that and sometimes we do groups in our homes, sometimes we basically do it in churches in our local area. And after the 8th week, everybody would be graduated. And they basically would kind of go to the four winds after that. And Nate Schlatzline looked at the concept. He loved biblical citizenship and said, what can we do to take biblical citizenship where after they've gone through the course, they've learned about the Constitution, they've learned about America's history and the Founding Fathers. What can we do where those groups actually become centers of activism and reformation in their communities? So we began looking at that concept. Well, let's do it. So we raised up, we trained coaches, and we launched this past January. Our coaches are starting groups all throughout Tarrant County where we are, they have biblical citizenship in their homes. And after they complete those courses, they began praying, Lord, where do you want to use me? Maybe some are called to run for office. If so, we put together what's called Campaign University, Campaign U. Maybe some are called to actually speak in school board meetings, in city councils. Maybe some are just off to be actually an intercessory prayer presence. But we take those graduates of biblical citizenship and then we move them to the next step and say, where's the Lord calling you? With your giftings, your talents, your abilities, your passions, where do you see yourself being mobilized in the community? So that is the approach that we're taking. We have biblical citizenship activism groups that we've launched in Tarrant, Johnson County, Denton, and Dallas counties. We'll soon be expanding to Waco, Austin, as well as San Antonio there, teaching individuals biblical citizenship principles and to become reformers. But what is so important is this. Oh, by the way, we just partnered with a church in Hawaii. This was last week. We're going in these blue states, Hawaii, Colorado, they get biblical citizenship leaders as well. So, I want to close the presentation here and allow a few minutes for discussion. Marcia told me and said we've got to start really wrapping up by 8:30 and get everybody out of the building by 9. So I want to honor that and take any questions or comments that you have.
I'm going to start with a totally different topic. When you and I met in Dallas, you told me your background, which I just thought was amazing. And I don't know if people in here had a chance to read that snapshot view that Marshall put up there. So my neighbor and I have agreed to share this book, but for those that haven't seen the book or aren't going to get it, can you give us like a 1-minute synopsis of your view on what really happened?
And which one is that?
This is the Wuhan incident.
Okay, the Wuhan incident, yeah. Just kind of a brief synopsis of the book. I look into the gain of function research that we collaborated with their own tax dollars with the lab in China. And at the time, I was leading one of the largest, it's actually bioterrorism emergency preparedness groups in North Texas. We were working actually with level 3 labs. Our job was to basically look for category 4 agents that could be weaponized, category A agents that could be weaponized. And I began seeing things that started taking place in government, because working in government. I worked with FBI, I worked with Homeland Security, and at first I thought I was just a typical guy doing my job to save America. But I began seeing things go south very quickly. Deep state. We suddenly got a new director who worked with a guy by the name of Dr. Anthony Fauci. Things went downhill very quickly because I was the guy, I raised my hand and asked questions. I said, okay, wait a minute. And I was told to shut up or put up and threaten with disciplinary action. So back during that time, earlier in 2020, what I saw was going on with COVID, I began looking and asking questions about, why isn't anybody asking these questions about the Wuhan lab? So I applied my background in epidemiology. I was a disease outbreak investigator. So I said, everybody's saying that this didn't come out of that level 4 lab in Wuhan, China. It came out of either a naturally occurring zoonotic, progression. Somebody bought some contaminated meat in the marketplace in Wuhan, and that's how it spread. Don't even say that it came out of a lab. You're like right-wing conspiracy theorists. So I was told, and I said, let's map this out. So I did a whole epidemiological mapping progression looking at the marketplace in Wuhan, and found out there was less than 1% probability from an epidemiological standpoint that would ever come out of a market or naturally occurring means. And I began looking at the lab. But I, along with many others, were told I was censored, I was shadow banned, I was shut down. And now, look at just a couple of weeks ago, the CIA happens to come on, oh guys, guess what? We think that this came out of a lab. Okay, so you know what it is? You know, Trump coming in, they're afraid of the shakedown. All the three-letter agencies will get on the chopping block. Okay, so but that's a little bit of the background. I have the gain of function, and in that I spent a great deal of time. All right, great.
Do you think it was accidental, or do you think it was released purposely?
Oh, you're talking about the virus? The viral construct itself was purposefully planned, the research, and here's why. Nearly 8 years prior to COVID, they were doing the gain-of-function research, taking what they call alpha-beta coronaviruses from the horseshoe-dwelling bats, okay? And it became such a fascination with the communist Chinese and with the lab in China, they said, what if we genetically alter this and enhance it? That's what really gain-of-function research is about. And from there, I believe that they were moving in a direction, it could have been a very serious bioweapon, but I believe it was deliberately planned.
But what about, do you think it leaked accidentally out of the lab, or do you think they purposely started the pandemic?
I think there's a little bit of, I think it could be a both and. We need more investigation to actually uncover that.
But I know he covers a whole chapter on China and the Communist Party, and their philosophy is to destroy, take over America without shooting a shot. So he can't say 100%, but read between the lines.
Yeah.
I mean, that's their philosophy. And they had a general with the Communist Party in the lab. So, I mean...
This is my editorial assistant, by the way, Linda, you're my research staff.
I like to say, I mean, I know we're not supposed to say 100%, but I'd say 99.9%.
Yeah. All right, another question back here.
Well, I think it came from Chapel Hill University in North Carolina, funded by the U.S.
Dr. Ralph Barrett. Dr. Ralph Barrett at Chapel Hill. Matter of fact, they trained through a project actually with Texas A&M.
Texas A&M.
In Galveston, they co-opted a project where they trained over 25 to 30 research scientists from Wuhan, China, to do genetic splicing. Yeah, very good. There's another question here.
Just a statement.
Uh-huh.
Are you aware that Dr. Christine Brady is Dr. Fauci's wife? She worked at the bioethics department at the NIH.
Yeah, a lot of ties. You've got a lot of those three-letter agencies. And of course, why would Fauci be pardoned? I mean, it really implies guilt, right? Okay, any other questions?
So the Fauci pardon was started anytime after 2014? So what's the significance of 2014?
Well, in 2014, there was a lot of, I see movement toward when the first grants, the first grant funding, the gain-of-function research, and that's what my assumption would be, because this whole thing between the NIH, CDC, and also Communist China, there was grant money started, and guys like Bill Gates, the Gates Foundation, along with Johns Hopkins University, were pouring millions of dollars into this. So why? Well, I believe they had this planned out. So I think the significance of 2014 would be ties to when that grant funding was being initiated, would be my hunch. All right, one more question, and we got to wrap it up. Yes, sir. Yeah, I would say, and here's the thing about it, where I agree with you on. Category A agents really inflict more fear upon a population. And it's really through fear that how they're able to implement control. During COVID, for instance, we totally gave up our liberties and freedoms to the talking heads, to the CDC, and suddenly the Health and Human Services, they had the authority that never been granted to them before, which I'm so thankful. Hopefully, Kennedy gets to the helm of Health and Human Services. The Health and Human Services is a health department, my goodness sake. And yet we had given them authority to implement laws, mandates, and drive vaccine mandates. But it was all on the basis of fear. People say, oh my, we're all going to die with this pandemic, this virus. And really the numbers in of itself did not add up. All right, we're going to wrap up. Make sure you visit with us.
Question.
Yeah.
What do you think about Abbott and his putting these 50-cent masks on people and shutting down their businesses? And how much trust do you have in his ability?
Oh my, don't get me started. I was on a conference call when, right before they went through all of these mandates, these closure mandates, on a conference call. And Abbott had turned to the Health and Human Services, actually he was the health commissioner in the state at the time, and said, what do you think we should do? Should we do all these mandates and closures? Well, the health commissioner is working for the CDC. His boss is Fauci. And, of course, what he's going to tell Abbott, yeah, I think we should do this. Masks, mandates, closures, let's do it. And I know in Tarrant County, within 24 to 48 hours, we had Democrat, he was actually Republican, but he was a rhino, Glenn Whitley, began signing executive orders for closures. All these crazy mandates. But anyhow, well, if you like, please visit me at the table. Any questions, you'd like to talk with me, love to invite questions, chat to get to know you. And thanks so much, Marcia, for having me here this evening.
Thank you, Mark Fulmer. You guys want to take a picture of this bio? And it's hard to do this man justice because he has done so much in so many different categories.